Hello, one and all. It is I, Professor Moptop. Glad to be back here for another thrilling adventure to be had with you. Thank you, as always, a million times over for all of your help and all of your support. This week, we're going to be talking about three Beatles songs. They all have something in common. See if you can figure it out by the end of our lesson today. The first song is called 8 Days a Week, and it was a potential single in the UK market. It was ultimately put on the Beatles' For Sale album. It was a single as well as an album track in the United States. Now, depending upon who you believe and which Beatle was telling the truth and which Beatle was confused, and depending when you heard this, it all depends on what you actually believe. Now, John Lennon at one point said that the song was written 100% by Paul, and it was a potential title to the second movie, which would ultimately be Help. Now, Paul said that he wrote it with John after hearing a phrase that Ringo said because he was so tired he felt like he had been working 8 days a week. Now, another point in time, Paul McCartney said that he heard the phrase from a chauffeur, and then he wrote the song all by himself with no help from John. And then on another occasion, John Lennon claimed that he helped finish the song. So it really depends on who you believe and when. There's October 6th, 1964 was the date that they started recording it, and it took a few times to get through it. First time, there was a vocal fade-in with some ooze, and they liked this idea, but they weren't exactly sure what to do with it, so they kept working on it. They ultimately decided to start over from scratch, and what they did was they had a fade into the song where it starts real silent and eventually fades in. There were plenty of fade-outs before that, but this was the first fade in for a song. There's a lot of firsts in Beatle land. Beatles 6 was the name of the album it was on in the United States, and the song was never performed live. It ultimately was relegated to the album because I Feel Fine was the single in the UK. Another Beatles for Sale track is Every Little Thing, which is a Paul and John 50-50 split, although it seems to be slightly more Paul than John. They considered it album filler. Most bands would be thrilled to have a song of the caliber of Every Little Thing. There's a lot more inconsistencies about who wrote it or when. These are all from Paul, though, because at one point he said he wrote it in Atlantic City, where they did have a few days off during the 1964 North America tour, and they did write a few songs. Paul at one point said he wrote it there. Another time he said he wrote it in England. Paul McCartney may have a bad memory, or he might just be confused. Who can tell? Paul might not even know. They rehearsed the song, and they added a couple of interesting things on it. One is a piano overdub, which they were slowly starting to use more and more. They also added a timpani drum played by Ringo, and there's possibly 3 guitars in the mix, which is the beginning of a different type of sound that the Beatles would have, which of course would be more than just 1 or 2 guitars. Occasionally, the vocals are double-tracked, but not through the whole song. It's not totally sure if George sings on it or not, and the song was never performed live. The third song we were going to talk about today, also for the Beatles' For Sale album, also from What You're Doing, was another one that they kind of thought as album filler. It was most likely written in Atlantic City, and it was mostly Paul, although it is a little bit more negative than usual, and it's believed that John contributed. Now, there are some Dylan influences in the song, as well as Buddy Holly. He does kind of a hiccup like Buddy Holly, and they have a change in rhyme scheme, which is internal rhyming, which is something that they likely learned from Bob Dylan. They may have known about it, but they didn't realize how important it could be to writing a good, positive, essential song. And John was also loving playing his acoustic guitar during this period, which is a very direct influence of Bob Dylan's. The other thing they do is they sing the first line of each song, the first word of each song, very loud. That's just another slightly new way of presenting their music. They worked on it, and then they scrapped it and started it over. This was becoming semi-regular in the world of the Beatles, where they would rehearse a little bit, and then they would figure out how they wanted to do it, and then start over from scratch. The intro is a direct inspiration from Be My Baby from the Ronettes. George plays his 12-string guitar. He was really getting into the twangy country song and the twangy country sound. And like I said, John was on his acoustic, which was very Bob Dylan. There's another piano overdub on this, possibly by George Martin, possibly by Paul. And as they kept coming up with new and new ways to write and record songs, they were getting through things quick. I refer to these songs as having a very short history with the Beatles because they wrote it, they recorded it, and once again, What You're Doing was never played live, which is the thing that all three of the songs this week have in common. Thank you a million billion times over. I will talk to you when I talk to you again. Thank you so much. I'm Professor Moptop.